When I was growing up on Folly Beach, my next door neighbor was named Bubba. Now, you have to understand that Bubba can be a name or a kind of person. You can pretty well identify a Bubba. He'll have a pickup truck. He'll have one of those sliding windows in the back that you can open up because Bubba will always have his radio turned up full blast, playing something like, "You done gone and left me forever," so that everybody can hear it. The Bubba that I had that lived next door to me was that kind of guy, and he had a truck that was unbelievable. This was a 1941 Ford pickup truck, and this thing was beautiful. It was solid red. I mean, it was so red it'd make your eyes hurt when you looked at it. Bubba also had every intention on becoming a millionaire. He would come up with the craziest ideas you could ever imagine. One time, out of a catalog, he ordered 100 snails. Took a little paintbrush and painted little numbers on the back of them. And he put a big piece of plywood in the back of his truck, and he'd drive around, he'd find a group of people, he'd line those snails up in a line across that piece of plywood where he had little bitty lines drawn like lanes, and he would try to get people to bet on the snail races. The only problem is most people would either fall asleep or leave before the snails ever got off the start line. As you can see, Bubba's ideas were not always the best. One day I walked out the door, and there was Bubba working on his pickup truck. Now, it's not like Bubba's truck was ever broken or anything. I mean, that thing was perfect in every way. Besides being such a beautiful color red, that truck had underneath the hood a solid chrome 400 horsepower Corvette engine. I mean, that thing was so bright, when you opened the hood, if the sun was shining, you best put on sunglasses. That thing would blow your eyeballs out. I mean, it was beautiful. And Bubba would not let one speck of anything get on that engine or that truck. I mean, if he backed that thing out of the yard and pulled back in again, well, he'd stop, he'd grab a Kleenex or handkerchief or a rag, and he kept that thing. It wasn't up to see him put 47 coats of wax on it in one day. I looked over there at Bubba's yard, and there was that truck. The hood was wide open. Bubba was leaning over, but it was a little strange because on the fender of that truck, he had a big, old, huge black box mounted, and there was hoses running off the front of it and hoses running off the back of it, and I called over there and I said, "Bubba, what in the world have you got over there?" He looked back over, he said, "Johnny, come here and look." And I walked over, he said, "You know what I got right here?" I said, "Well, I don't know, it looks kind of strange." "What's that box?" He says, "You are looking at the world's first 400 horsepower leaf-sucking machine." I said, "A what?" He said, "That's right, the world's first 400 horsepower leaf-sucking machine." I said, "A leaf-sucking machine?" This time of year happened to be fall, and of course you know why fall is called fall, because all the leaves do what? Fall off the trees. And in Charleston, in the area where I grew up, the leaves hate to fall off the trees. I mean, they hold on to the last second. And then one morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, you'll be sound asleep, you'll hear, whoom! You look out the window, all the leaves has done fall off the tree, and they're piled everywhere. Nobody really likes to rake leaves. Now, if I were to ask you to raise your hand and say if you like to rake leaves, you might do that, but you know what? You'd be lying. I mean, how many times as a kid did you wake up, look out the window, see all them leaves on the ground, run in there, grab your daddy, start shaking, and say, "Daddy, where's the rake? I want to rake me some leaves. I'm going to rake our leaves. I'm going to rake the neighbor's leaves. I'm going to rake everybody's leaves, and I don't want no money. I love it so much." We all know that's not going to happen. Bubba said, "You see, this here is a government surplus aircraft carrier vacuum cleaner." I said, "An aircraft carrier vacuum cleaner?" He said, "Yeah, got it down at the Army Navy surplus store, and this sucker is powerful." I said, "Well, if it vacuum an aircraft carrier, I expect it would be." He said, "Boy, clean one of them things, clean as a whistle, and I blinked." He said, "Let me explain it to you here. You see this here hose in the front? This here is the sucking hose. This one here in the back, this one here is the blowing hose. Now, what happens is the sucking hose sucks the leaves up. They go into this box. They get all ground up and spit out the back of the truck right into the bed. This here belt you see running down to the motor, well, out there's the power. When I crank this baby up, this thing will start to sucking." I said, "Bubba, you know, you've come up with some crazy ideas before, but actually this one could be a winner." "But Bubba, does it really work? You remember them snail races you set up that time?" He said, "Oh, no problem. Watch this. There was a big old pile of leaves sitting over on the side of the yard. That thing was about 5 feet long and about 6 feet high. He said he leaned into the truck and he hit the key. Boom, 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 boom. That engine come alive. And the engine sounded so beautiful. And that belt started spinning. And that old vacuum cleaner come to life. And it started. You could hear that hose was sucking. Bubba reached down. He picked him up a brick and he set it on the gas pedal. That thing revved up a little more. That belt spinning a little faster. That hose started sucking harder. And he took the end of that hose. He said, watch this. He stuck it right in that pile of leaves. And before you could even say, what happened? It sucked them leaves up. Spit them out the back. It just filled up the back of that truck. I said, Bubba, I do think you got it. I think you will be a millionaire. But will it work on a big pile of leaves? And I pointed over there beside the house, and there was a real pile of leaves. I mean, that thing's about 3 times higher than me and Bubba put together, and Bubba wasn't no little guy. He said, that ain't nothing. Watch this. He reached down and picked him up another brick and set it right on top of the first one. And whoom, that thing come louder, and that whole little belt was spinning around, and that hose was spinning. And Bubba reached over. He grabbed that hose. He stuck it in that pile of leaves. And now, what Bubba didn't know was the neighbor's Siamese cat was sleeping in that pile of leaves. Spit him out the back, naked as a jaybird. Now, of course, that cat were none too happy. And so he decided to leave. Now, he decided to leave right through those double windows in the back where Bubba would keep open, and he'd keep that, you done light, and music was blaring out the back, and he jumped through that window, and he landed right on Bubba's toolbox that he always kept on the front seat. That toolbox fell off the seat, landed on top of them bricks that was sitting on top of the gas pedal, and whoop! All 400 horsepower come alive at once. Man, that thing saw Bubba was holding on that hose and just lifted him right up off the ground. Started swinging him around, slapped him up against the side of the house, knocked him loose. He fell on the ground. That hose, it sucked the bark off the trees. It sucked the leaves off the trees. It spun around. It sucked 4 rows of vinyl siding off the side of the house. Sucked the rain gutters off. This flock of blackbirds just flying over. Sucked them things like that. And then it turned around like Frankenstein and started coming after Bubba. Oh, Bubba started backing up. He was on his hands and knees. He's trying to get away. He said, help me! I would have helped him, but I was laughing too hard, if you know what I mean. And Bubba was just going. That thing was sucking on. It sucked his hat clean off his head. Started sucking on his face, and I just know Bubba was a goner. And he would have been, except at the last minute. The door opened up, and out come my little brother, Eugene. Now, you'd have to see Eugene to imagine him. He looked kind of like a pencil with a basketball on top. I mean, that dude was skinny, and he had a big head, and he needed a big head and a big mouth because Eugene was a world's champion whiner. I mean, he could whine like nobody's business, and he whined about everything. It was terrible. And old Eugene walked out the door, and he said, what's going on out here? Well, I guess that vacuum cleaner didn't like whining any more than anybody else. It turned around, and it started coming after Eugene. Well, it was something to see. You should have seen that little old pencil, that basketball, and big little eyes popped wide open, his mouth up, and I go, help me! And he turned around, and he grabbed a hold of that screen door, but it were too late. I mean, that hose was bearing down on him, and it just lifted that, Eugene didn't weigh about 35 pounds. That thing just lifted him right up off the ground. He was holding on to that screen door with one hand and just flapping in the air. Help! I'd have helped, but I was laughing too hard, if you know what I mean. And that thing just sucked his shoes and socks right off. Sucked his britches right off. And there was poor Eugene holding on the door with one hand, flapping in the air, holding on to his underwear with the other hand, hollering, help! I would help, but remember, I was laughing too hard. But being the kind, loving brother that I was, I knew I had to do something, so I headed into the house to get the camera. I figured, boy, if I could get a picture of this, it'd look great in the family album. Well, I got that camera. I come back out. I started getting it I was just about ready when, boom, Bubba's engine blowed up. And that thing just kind of wound down. Oh, Eugene, he just kind of flopped down to the ground, but he's so dumb he didn't even know it. He's still laying down there going, help, help. Took him about 5 minutes to realize he wasn't being sucked on no more. And he did. He jumped up in the house underneath the sofa. And listen, tell you what, it weren't easy to get that big old head underneath the sofa, but boom, somehow he did it. Well, when Mama come home, we like to never got him out. I mean, she'd grab a toe, I'd grab an ear, we'd pull, he'd spring right back in again. We finally did get him out, and, well, it was not a good day for Bubba. I mean, his motor was blowed up. His $1 million business has gone down the drain. But, you've heard about there being a silver lining behind them black clouds? Well, in this case, I can tell you there was. Because you see, sometimes I had to babysit Eugene. You can imagine what that was like. Anytime I tell him something to do, he'd say, "You can't make me. You ain't my mama. You ain't my daddy." But ever since this happened, all I had to do was sneak up behind him with the dustbuster. Whee, whee, under the sofa. Wouldn't come out again till Mama come home.